I think after last week we don't had any classes.
Yes.
So
So
Mr.
previous,
Karthik, yeah, is it okay if you can give 1 or 2 minutes recap what we have so far covered on our last uh, 5 sessions?
yeah, sure. So previously, as we might have known, this particular internship program is basically about educating students and prospective students about what the course is about, what is the industry standards, or what is the requirement for working in a penetration environment as a on the DevSecOps environment, right? It's that is what we're predominantly focusing our internship program based on. So for that purpose, the course material was designed in such a way itself. So during our initial class, we went with introduction to cybersecurity, where we saw what are the different things that can, what do you mean by vulnerability, what do you mean by CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and look at a lot of other things related to cybersecurity as a basics for that, right? So this course, if you go back and see those videos for that particular session, we will see that we talk more about, what it introduces someone to cybersecurity. Someone who is not aware of cybersecurity, introducing them to cybersecurity. When we moved on from that, the second week we spoke about penetration testing and infrastructures, scanning VAPT as a role, what you are going to do on a day-to-day basis in that, what are the different activities, and what is a vulnerability analysis, what are the different stages of a vulnerability analysis. All those things we will have looked into that section of that. Okay. Along with that, we had two practical sessions. After that, we were in one of the sessions, we saw how do we configure firewall, how does a defense at the network level occurs, right? What is a firewall? How does it look at the packet? What are the components that are make up a firewall? That was discussed. And along with that, we also see from a network scanner perspective, we saw how Nmap is working and what are the different options of that and how do we identify vulnerabilities based on the information that we get from that part, right? When we scan, there's a response for the scan. So based on that, how do we check whether device is up or down, what services it may be running, all those information, we look into that part of it. After that, there was a break due to my personal reasons I could not attend the previous class. But today, we'll be talking more about from a DevSecOps route, right? So what happens in a DevSecOps environment, we'll talk about that and we'll see. Okay. So,
So guys, if you have any questions, doubt regarding classes or these courses or anything related to cybersecurity or job market, before Mr. Karthik jump in, you can ask the question. During the session also you can ask, but it is a good time to ask, right?
yes,
Okay, I don't think anyone have any questions so far.
sure. Yeah. So now, before we could get into DevSecOps, right? It is important for us to understand what is a DevOps system because we have to understand what is that we are securing, what is the different stages of it security out there. So as in the previous session, when we spoke about penetration testing, infrastructure testing, that usually comes under the at a later stage of your a life cycle, software development life cycle. So how to incorporate security at an earlier stage of that, right? So DevOps can be explained as people working together to convince, build, and deliver secure software at top speed. DevOps practice enables software developers and operations team to accelerate, deliver through automation, collaboration, fast feedback, and iterative improvement. Right. So basically, this is basically we're talking about using agile methodology where the software lifecycle model is reduced compared to waterfall model. Previously, it was there. A releasing of a product would take a lot of time, right? 6 to 7 months on an average, 3 months on a very least amount of places. So instead of doing that, they decided to release products at an incremental way, and but the releases were quite often in that situation, right? So now the problem here again comes into is that whenever, right, there are problems, it comes in two folds here, right? So what are the problems here? One is speed versus security, right? Automation vulnerability, lack of security integration, insufficient security skills, cultural shift, technical dip, and insufficient skills as well. That's that, right? One of the main reasons, apart from this, that comes into play is the skill shortage problem as well, right? So what happened was, for every pen tester or ethical hacker that is there was more than developers. In earlier stages, it was around this scenario. For every 10,000 developers, there was only one pen tester. So this 10,000 developers may be working on approximately over 100 products or 70 projects on that, and this one pen tester will not have sufficient time to test all those things. Right now, it has come down. I think probably will come down to, for every pen tester there are 200 developers. This is not an official number. I'm just giving a number out there, but still, this becomes a bit of an issue. Right? There's a lot of skill gap that is there. And second part is that once the application is deployed, right? Once the application is deployed, after that penetration testing is done, we will find vulnerabilities in the penetration testing. Now, fixing this vulnerability after it has been deployed, the cost is going to go up again. Why? Because this fixes has to be designed again. This have to be coded again. This have to be tested again. Then after that, it can be deployed into production again, right? This entire life cycle is going to cost you more because developers have to work extra hours on that rather than working on features that is required. They have to work on this particular fixes of them. So this becomes an issue. Cost is also a major concern of that. Cost is not only from a development cost perspective. Think about a product delayed is also revenue lost, right? So let's say there's one particular product that people are going to use. Let's say ChatGPT is a paid promotion. That like people have to pay to use a patent product like ChatGPT or some kind of image AI part. Let's say due to a security reason, that product that deployment goes to take a week or later, even or by 10 days, let's say. That will actually cost them money because people are not going to buy. They're going to lose that 10 days of revenue. There's a good chance that after 10 days, they would have moved on. Before the 10 days when the product is not there, they would have moved on to a different portal for getting the particular product or a similar product they would move on. So we have to be careful with that components as well, right? So that plays a very important criteria here. Speed versus security, right? DevOps predominantly focuses more on speed, getting the product earlier, doing the life cycle is shortened, so you get it deployed earlier, right? So managing security becomes a bit of an issue, even though you're developing the products earlier, because PT is done at the end of it is actually reduces the speed of this, right? Then again, automation of vulnerability checking is a big issue that is going to be a major problem out there. How do we automate vulnerability scanning and things can be done in a later stage or not? That becomes an issue. Lack of security integration, right? So now when we're talking about pen testing, you see this is in earlier stages of DevOps, it is not integrated with it is not integrated with the DevOps part. So it is done separately. So then again, it affects the DevOps automation pipeline and this kind of an activity. So again, that is one thing. Second part is another point is insufficient security skill. This still is a major issue. There are a lot of security engineers out there who don't have the sufficient skill set. There are a lot of developers out there who want to build that skill set out there, and it is not there, right? It is quite difficult for a lot of organizations to hold on to quality security engineers because there's always someone else who is paying extra, right? And we have faced similar issue in my organization. I would have spent about a week's days, 10 days working with a candidate, interviewing him for a couple of things, and then we offer him extra package, and then he'll agree with that. And before he could join in a month's time, which usually the notice period about 90 days for the company, he would have moved on to someone else because someone else offered a better package for that. Right? It affects, right? On an average, we're looking at if there is an open position, let's say someone is there in security or we want to fill someone in security, It is taking somewhere between 4 months to 6 months to fill that position. A lot of time that position that get filled by training an internal employee into that role. That will be much more faster. Right. And cultural shift is also there. Lot of problems what we see when we are looking at cybersecurity, we're looking at features like that when we're testing, right? Those things, vulnerabilities are introduced out there because developers are not following a certain set of actions. That is not culturally, security is not culturally included in their day-to-day approach, right? So it is an afterthought that should not be there. So they should take up security on a day-to-day activity right from design phase and doing all that part, right? Again, technical depth is not there, right? So that is because even though people are working in security, they don't have enough knowledge to focus on, right? So what is required? They may be so good, they may have knowledge about security, but not to the knowledge they can secure the application of that, right? That becomes a major problem, right? So how do we overcome this scenario? There are multiple things we can do. One is shift left approach, security as a code, right? Continuous integration and training and awareness. These are multiple steps that we can do to overcome this situation. So in shift left is incorporate security from the earlier stages of development life cycle. That's reducing chances of late stage vulnerabilities. Code security as a code implement security measure as part of the code itself, enabling automatic enforcement of security policies, right? Continuous security, integrate security into monitoring and testing into DevOps environment pipeline. That is going to be another factor into that process as well, right? And training and awareness, and properly training the employees to overcome the drawbacks that what is the skill gap is there in cybersecurity. We need to overcome those things as well, right? So let's look at from a shift left approach, what exactly is that part, right? So in a software development life cycle, the any part whenever there is something, some requirement is going to be, sorry, there is something called as an, the client will give you a set of requirements out here, right? Once that requirement is given out there, let's say for a website, before they first they have to design out there. So design, it will come, let's say how many pages you're going to have. You're going to have a login page. If the login failed, it will show a failed login page or message that is going to be displayed here. Once the login board, then you will going to be taken to a dashboard. Then after dashboard, you can look at your profile information where it will tell the users information out there. Or if you want to view some other information, there's one more page that actually goes up, right? If you see even in your mobile, as soon as you log in, there are different things that can be out there. That is the flow. So that is predominantly from the design phase itself, where it will talk about from a functionality perspective, where the coding has not started at all, right? From there, it will move on to the coding phase. Once that functionality design is complete, the developers will write code for that. Yeah, right. And then again, once the code is done, they are going to test that the code is working properly. Then they are going to deploy that code. And finally, this is a security testing of that. This is before DevSecOps, right? So what we need to do is that instead of having security in the last, we want to bring security in an earlier stage itself. We want to bring security to an earlier stage itself. So how we are going to how do we overcome this kind of a situation? So here is what we saw earlier, right? So in the design phase itself, your engineers like the DevSecOps engineers or security engineers are going to sit with the development team. You remember when we talk about pen testing, the security engineers will part of secure pen testing team out there. So they know what are the possible vulnerabilities that could arrive out there, right? They will check if software that is used is up to date or is there any vulnerability in the software you're using. So they also tell what is the password policy. Are you making sure password policies is there? Is there any protection for XSS? Is any protected for command injection? All that information is going to be given to the designer out here, the security engineer, and they will incorporate in the design phase itself that how to fix this vulnerability at this the design. So based on the design itself, now I can implement code security, right? Instead of me finding vulnerability, then fixing it after that, I will anticipate in the design environment what vulnerabilities could be there, and I will write a code at that stage itself, right? When I'm testing, after coding, the testing is application is testing for functionality. We will also check for security issues in these cases, right? So basically, that is what from this is going to be the middle point of deployment or product lifecycle. That is the deployment stage. We are moving away from right towards the left. Okay, and that if you can do it as early as possible, this is going to help improve with the identification of vulnerabilities and keeping the application secure, right? In real time, we have seen in an average, let's say if I do an application testing for a non-DevSec, non-shift left approach, we approximately find about 20 to 25 vulnerabilities. This is an average. It changes application to application sometimes, but this is that. But if we see when there's a shift left approach, when we're actually application testing out, the PT is going done, vulnerability from 20 to 25 is significantly reduces to 4 to 5 vulnerabilities. That is how difference is going to be there. Now, fixing 20 to 25 vulnerabilities is going to be a big ask. We have to tell developers not to work on certain products and focus on fixing the vulnerabilities. Whereas here, since these vulnerabilities are small and also they are lower level vulnerabilities, you might have seen, we saw the vulnerabilities, it is going to be in critical, high, medium, and low, right? And we'll see that 4 to 5 are in medium, not a critical or high bugs out there. So it is also easier to fix out here, right? So that is the main approach of one of the main things, right? Whenever you're talking about DevSecOps, we'll talk about a shift left approach, right? So what is a develop? Continuously integrating. What is the DevSecOps? It is continuously integrating security in all stages of it, right? That is very much important, right? In traditionally emphasize on collaboration between developers and operations. In DevSecOps, it added security mix, creating a seamless integration between system reliance reliability. This shift left in security ensures that security is considered from the beginning of the software lifecycle rather than and being an afterthought, right? In some cases, we are seeing security is also going to be part of the requirement by the client itself. Client itself are giving a security requirement. They themselves will told we need a possible for user creation and make sure whenever that user is created, the password length is minimum 12 to 16 character long. They will tell make sure we want there is insufficient protection for XSS attack and any other kind of an attack. At a requirement stage itself, the client is asking, right? So when this becomes a norm, it is much more difficult to introduce vulnerabilities. We are intertwining security at an earlier stage itself, right? So in fact, when DevSecOps comes into play, they act as the middleman between the development team and the operations team, which was in the DevOps case, right? They are connecting with multiple people. They are connecting with development operations. Not only that, they are also interacting with senior management and they're also interacting with other departments to collaborate on security. Because security is not a single person or a single department responsibility. It is everyone's responsibility in an organization. And the orchestration or managing of the security is going to be taken care by the security team, right? So that is there. So what are the benefits of DevSecOps, right? Proactive security, cost-effective speed, and collaboration. By integrating security from the start, potential vulnerabilities are identified and addressed earlier. So as I told, at the design phase also only we can identify vulnerability is there and fix those vulnerability in an earlier stage. Cost effective, rectifying security issues later in development cycle can be expensive. DevSecOps mitigate this cost, right? Once, because every time it goes back, think about when you incorporate security at the design phase itself, right? This was in what do you mean? A research was conducted how it is going to cost security perspective, right? If you identify a vulnerability at the design phase itself, it will roughly cost about $5 because from day point one, you are going to write the code in a secure way, right? If you identify a vulnerability in coding, it's going to cost around $500. If it cost in deployment mode, right, it will cost over $5,000. Post deployment, right? That is going to be a big impact. Why this can be depending on the vulnerability, this could go in millions also, right? So I think one of the companies which was doing Equifax, I think so, which was doing credit, social security number, credit checking, and everything. They lost about half a population of US information, social security number, and other information was lost by them, which they are collected in their database to the hackers. It was estimated that they spent around 100 and almost $100 million to just to inform customers, right, that they have been hacked, their information has been gone out there, right? So that is how impact is going to be. In some situations, there are certain big uh, supermarket chains, retail chains, which got hacked, and that information got which less to billions of dollars out there, right? What something could have been fixed by implementing security at the design phase itself, where it will cost years, it could take up, snowball into a very big amount. The reason why it goes up in every stage is that once I find a vulnerability in code, it always has to go back to the design phase. It means there's already a set structure out here for your application. Now I have to make changes to this set structure and then add new into that. It will add more time to that. So since developers are paid by the hour, and this is how what we're thinking of that, right? So when you come back and go back and it has to spend again, then the coder has to recode the code, it will increase. When it goes to deployment, again, it has to go to completely other thing, right? If this one set of the problem is there, entire application affected, and I have to go to each and every part of the application and make changes, it is going to take time. That is very, very important for us that we don't go in this particular sense, right? Speed. So it is also DevSecOps can expedite delivery timeline by catching and correctly securing early issues, right? So now I'll just give you an example out there. I was working for a very particular, Middle Eastern bank. They had a particular app for their iPad, and this app was used by managers. Okay, and this is basically for getting investors into invest. So these managers are not small managers. They only reach out to clients who are having $10 million deposit in that particular bank out there, right? So make it more easier or make it more a structured approach to getting the investment done. This app was there. So they had a critical bug. We tested that this particular app had a critical vulnerability, something like a critical vulnerability. We told you cannot launch the app. Right. This app got delayed by 10 days. They actually lost a lot of investment because these customers they don't keep that money in the bank, right? They want to always that money to earn. So they keep on investing in that. And because there was a delay, the managers could not reach out to the customers and they had invested money in that part. But if they had brought in security during the design phase itself, right, they wouldn't have this extra 10 days of time and they wouldn't have lost money because of that, right? So it is lot cheaper to cost effective for us to introduce security in earlier stage itself. In some cases, the client will not use a particular app, right? So let's say there could be some products out there. Let's say if you see, take Gmail as well. Gmail is pen tested by external auditors like EY and things. A lot of companies will ask Gmail, are you being pen tested? Only when they give out the certificate that it has been pen tested and it was found to be safe, they will go and take up Gmail services for their organization. In a similar way, there could be a lot of other products that are there. An organization is used. the client will decline to use it if there is no PT report done out there. So you want to know that if I'm connecting my data to a company, I want to know that my data is safe, right? It is very, very important, right? It is also going to help you speed up that. Collaboration, enhanced collaboration between development, operation, security lead to more resilient software solutions, right? Previously, PT was done as an entirely separate entity. There is no day-to-day interaction. There is no day-to-day interaction, and PT is predominantly once in 3 months that is there on a bare minimum. In some cases, it is an year. Every year that is going to be happen out there for 1 week. So in that entire development life cycle, the penetration tester is not involved at all in the situation, right? So this even let's say on day one, a vulnerability is introduced till it get tested, whether it is on third month or end of an year, that vulnerability will be open. If someone hacker gets to know about that, he can identify that vulnerability, he can hack it out, right? That becomes an issue. In DevSecOps, pen testers are regularly interacting, security professionals are regularly interacting with the operations team and the development team and making sure that product is safe. Okay. So here it comes in a very, very different scenarios, right? What are the different tool sets are very, very important. Just a second. Let me have some water. DevOps is predominantly focused on automation, right? When DevOps came into play, automation was big news at that time, right? Just like we're seeing AI at the right moment right now for everything, we're looking to integrate AI. When automation came into play, that is what we wanted, right? We want to include more automation, reducing the human interference in the life cycle, development life cycle of that. For security, automation also plays an important role. The main reason is security is not easy, right? Security is not easy. Getting right set of people to work on security is going to be a major problem. One second. Getting security, right set of people is a major problem out here. So there will always be cybersecurity professional are going to always they are going to be in demand, right? So, but there are not enough people out there. Even the demand is satisfied out there. So, I want to do is that I want to allow my developers to be able to automate the security steps, right? We need to be able to help them out to automate that process. And every time there is a code changes, the security process should be done out there. And how to do that process. So that is when we come into the introducing security in CI/CD pipeline. But for this, we should have sufficient number of tools that are there, which will aid us in doing this activity. So before going in here, so let's look at what are the different components that make up an application, right? So for let's say I want to run a Java application. So what are the things that is required? First and foremost, I will require an operating system, right? That is going to be there. Then again, I will need to have the Java installed out there. And some cases you may be installing other software along with that as well, right? And once you have the environment set up out there, you are supposed to code that environment that is there. And after that, let's say you are running the environment in a container basis, like then you need Docker. Docker needs to be installed and you're going to create an image using the Docker author. So the code is going to be deployed in this Docker image. And then finally it is going to be deployed. Where can the vulnerabilities be introduced? Right? If we see our first case in the, when we talk about pen testing, vulnerabilities can be introduced in three places. One is in your application, the code that you are writing. Second part is the configuration that you're doing, whether it's OS configuration or application configuration, and the third party tool that's going to be there. And finally is going to be the third party tool. Right? For instance, Java, you're going to use this program, but the code for Java is not written by you. It has been someone else's code you're taking and using it. Same thing for your operating system, the Ubuntu or Windows or anything. It does not belong to you. It belongs to someone else out there. So I need to find a way to scan for vulnerabilities in all these stages. Okay. For code scanning, there's something called as a SAST, right? When the application is finished development, when it is live, I need to scan for vulnerabilities that we are going to see in DAST, Dynamic Application Security Testing, that is going to be there. Then again, SCA, Software Composition Analysis, that is there. This is looking at all the third-party tools and finding any vulnerabilities there. Let's say if I'm using Java, it will check for that. If I'm using jQuery for a front end, it will check all the third-party components that are there. Is there any vulnerabilities? Do we need to update the software that we are using? All those things will be taken care by the SCA of that. All right. Then again, it is going to be Docker image. Something like an image scanner is needed by us to check for any kind of vulnerabilities in the image. And this is a very good possibility. If you know or aware of Docker image or anything, in the Docker image creation, we would have selected the OS out there, right? Something like Ubuntu. If I give OS as Ubuntu, it will take the latest one. But let's say for your application to work, you're working on a particular version. And let's say I'm using Ubuntu 14.04. This Ubuntu was released in 2014, right? And there's a lot of security bugs in that, but you may not be aware of that, right? So you are launching into that part. So how do we find out in this kind of a situation there is a vulnerability of that? It is very important for us to identify vulnerability in all the stages, but doing it manually is not going to be sufficient, right? Doing manually is going to be sufficient. As I told, PT is a very resource intensive from a human man hours, working man hours out there. So it will takes a lot of time from us. Even a vulnerability assessment running a scanner is going to take time. And again, scanners are a bit different. DAST is also a scanner out there, but InfraScan is again going to be done once in a month, but it does not identify any vulnerabilities which was introduced on a daily code merging process, right? So that is what is there. So now in a CI/CD pipeline where the code was taken from GitHub and code was built automatically and it was deployed without having any intervention from the human being, we can do the same thing now, right? I'm going to take the code. I'm going to scan the code for any vulnerabilities using source code scanner like SonarQube. And along with that, we are going to use Dash tool where you are using Zap or some other tools for scanning vulnerabilities out there. And also we'll check for software composition analysis, right? OWASP dependency checker is some of the tools that are there. And once that is there, then it will build, right? After building, before deploying, it will check the Docker image. It is then it is any vulnerabilities in Docker image. If nothing is there, it will deploy, right? Everything in this line is going to be done in an independent way. No more intervention from human being till it, and all the reports that is going to be generated will be kept aside. So we can go back and see what are the new vulnerabilities that are introduced. And that is what we are seeing in this pipeline, DevSecOps pipeline and DevOps pipeline. In the DevOps part, we're looking how to develop the application and looking at different processes that can be done. In the DevSecOps, in each and every stage, right? For source code, we can use tools such as SonarQube, Fortify, Checkmark, and Veracode out there for scanning vulnerabilities in the code. From the OWASP enable, and this is only for predominantly for infra level scanning. I'm trying to identify any of this, right? And testing and scanning artifacts. Then again, you can do Nessus for that, deployment process for that. And finally, we can do monitoring as well, right? There are Splunk, Catchpoint, and UpGuard. for doing this particular actions. This is very, very important for us. This is very, very important for us to go ahead with this activity. And this is where the majority of the job as a DevSecOps engineer comes into play, managing different settings in this process. Right. Before I go move on to threat modeling, I want to ask, is there any questions before we could move further?
Yeah, good morning from here. So I wanted to ask, looking at the CDI, CI/CD pipeline, right? Through the
Yes.
development, software development life cycle. So, with the emergence of AI, right, and other automation technology. So, my question is, to your own understanding or with what you know, as being advanced as you are, do you think um, AI will impact, um, you know, um, DevOps engineers, like the skills of DevOps engineers, if it's going to impact it in what way?
Mhm.
I'm thinking is going to affect it. Maybe negatively. Negatively, I mean, much hands will not be required to do the work of a DevOps, right? That is what I'm thinking. So I don't know if
Mhm.
you have any clarification on that, because for example, in some of my school projects, right, I don't go about writing code. So I use some
Mm.
AI to be able to solve such problems. So in terms of developing an application, do you think or do you not think that AI can be leveraged to do that? But then if it's used to leverage on that, so if you now look at the iteration process, where you when you pick the code, that's the design code, test and deploy. So don't you think this chain will be broken?
No, is what I don't. I'm currently working a little bit on. We are trying to introduce AI into our projects that are there. We are not trying to reduce the our workforce. Probably in some situations, we are actually trying to add more people into that part. Right. The main reason is the cost of product or software development is going to drop significantly because AI is going to be introduced, right? One of the reasons a lot of applications don't get updated or new features is not added to a product when a client or a company requires is that it is going to cost them to add more product into that part,
Mhm.
right? Because it is very expensive. When we are bringing AI, it is actually going to enable the user developer to do a better coding practice of them, right? What we are talking about, AI is going to take away developers job and everything. If you go back couple of years back when DevOps came into play, right? DevOps is developed to a place what we are seeing right now is because automation is a bigger part of its success. Without automation, you don't, think about in a previous scenarios,
Mhm.
every day there would be one person who's going to manually take the code, build that project, then push it in the production or testing environment or anything. There'll be multiple people doing out there. When DevOps CI/CD pipeline came up, that entire two or three jobs is wiped out, right? But what it made happen was it made the project better. It costed a lot less, not only from a salary perspective, it meant that cost of managing a project also goes down. So when that happens, the client is having a set budget for the IT expenditure that is going to be there. They are going to add more production to that part, right? Similarly, I feel AI is, yes, there is going to be reduction in jobs, but I don't think so. It is not as much as anticipated. We'll be looking at more product. Even smaller businesses will be able to afford a complex software architecture. It becomes much more time. right? And same thing about AI is that think about there are two people out there, right? And a beggar is having a stick and a warrior is having a sword. If we exchange, if we exchange and give the stick to a fighter or a warrior and the beggar is going to be handed over a sword, and both of them fight in that way, who is going to win, right? Even though the warrior is having a stick and a beggar is having that, warrior is always going to win because the skill set of the warrior is at another level, and he will know how to use whatever at his disposal to his advantage, right? So AI is going to only going to enable you to be a better programmer, better developer, better operations engineer, better at running the services out there. Okay. So understanding AI, it is going to be very important for us. Okay. The more earlier you start adapting, it's not that you have to adapt AI tomorrow in your job. Start referring what's happening out there. Start attending classes, how it can be used, how can I use, AI to make my work better. And literally, I will tell you, there was one product that was need to be, we need to give a proof of concept for a client, and all the developers are busy. We went with an AI component of the, for us, I gave us a brief into that part using the AI in about 40 minutes time, right? Someone was able to write a prompt and we got the code within the user interface and everything out there. And we were able to demonstrate, right? Now the client is considering that product to be launched. So now it becomes much more, right? Think about a lot of times, let's say you want to start a company, right? As a development services you want to give. Previously, you need to hire a lot of people to start your own organization. And that would be a big risk for you. So you'll tell, okay, let me save up enough. No, probably you can run with two or three people, a very good, services company as well. So it is going to enable you. It is not going to, as we think, right? People who are competent enough, capable enough engineers will be successful. And in fact, they'll be more successful at doing their job better, is what I feel. Right? It is, it is, yeah. Yeah, Chris, please go ahead.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Okay,
You
thank
had,
you.
yeah. Okay. Any other question, guys, before we move forward? Okay. Let's continue with that. It probably in the next cycle or a few other cycles, we'll try to incorporate more AI into see how it is going to be there. But again, in AI also, just like we are identifying the what are the tools that is relevant here, we have to look at tools in AI. Different AIs perform different kind of an activities out there. That also comes into play. Choosing the right AI to do your activity. Uh, Pen testing and cybersecurity is one of those places where we will see AI integration at a later stage. There's a lot of work happening in pen testing, cybersecurity. The major reason why we will see a little bit of delayed, integration of AI into cybersecurity cycle is that related to the ethical part of it, right? Because here we're talking about breaching organization, leaking data, fixing bugs and everything. It is a bit more sensitive, right? We cannot let a machine decide what is needed, how to go ahead with that part and things like that, right? For a simple example, let's say there's an application we are testing, we identify a security vulnerability out there, and then we know that what vulnerability can be exploited further into do an organization level hack. That application can open the door to a much more bigger attack in the organization. In those situations, we take in a conscious decision. Let's reach out to the management, client management, and tell them, and do they want us to go further with the attack phase and things like that, right? So that is a conscious decision where I am making. Will AI do that, stop the attack out there and wait for someone to respond? Or it is going to take a decision to go further and do an attack? In some cases, we'll see that we will stumble upon to a production environment when we are hacking in that or pen testing that. There's a lot more caution taken care by us that we should not introduce any new vulnerabilities into that or any kind of impact. Can you look into that part from an AI perspective? Okay. So that is that we have to look into that. So let's move on. So we'll talk about threat model. Okay. Threat modeling is a family of activities for improving security by identifying threats and designing countermeasures to prevent or mitigate the effects or threat to the system. A threat is a potential or actual undesirable event that may be malicious or incidental. Threat modeling is planned activity for identifying and assessing application threats and vulnerabilities. All right. So now to understand a particular pattern, what exactly is happening out here, let's assume there is you will see a lot of Hollywood movies, right, about prison break and things and everything. You will see that there are different types of prisoners are put in a separate compounds, and again this is going to have the compound is going to be fenced out there. There may be multiple layers of security out here, and they might be having a CCTV coverage, and there's a guards that are there to check out that who is there and everything. How do they know where to do what activity, where exactly to place a CCTV camera, where exactly to have a guard out here and doing all those activities, right? So for this, before we could build this prison and do all the security, safety precautions out there, there may be a bunch of people who are sitting in a table in a room having a discussion. They will think about possible ways prisoner can break out, right, in out of the prison. And then based on what are the points they're looking at, they will put relevant for that. So if that the wall is of very short height, they'll see that people will be able to jump over it or find some other way to cross that. So they'll tell, okay, having a wall at this particular size is important because we cannot have an infinite high wall because it is going to cost them. So every feet a wall goes high, the cost is going to be a lot more higher because the entire compound, all these has to be done on that, right? So they have to come up with an optimal space for that. What is the optimal height where it will make it very difficult for 99.9% of prisoners to break out. All those things has to be taken care. Where they could jump, where is the blind spot out there? In those situations, they'll put cameras and things like that. All those things has to be done. So this process of sitting down and looking at the design and looking out where there could be any problems in cybersecurity is called threat modeling, right? I'm going to look at an application. As an hacker, I will know, right, where are the things I can hack into that part. Looking at a simple application, I can tell, okay, if it is a login page is there, I will tell I can do brute force, I can do SQL injection, there I can do rate limiting out there. If there is a password complexity is not there, there's something I can do. If there's an OTP, I know how to bypass OTP. Multi-factor authentication can be compromised. I will have a list of things that could be done out there, right? And now, if I know that, if I can tell developer while designing an application itself, while writing the code itself, make sure there is a security mechanism for brute forcing, right? There's a security mechanism for OTP bypassing out there, right? Make sure there is a security mechanism for capture, right? You will see a lot of times nowadays when you enter forgot password or anything, there's a capture out there. Why? Because we were able to do a brute forcing and send a large request that forgot password link to the server, making it, you know, for example, I'll give an for threat model how it is going to be there. Let's say there is a forgot password page where you have to put is here, you put your email here, and then you click on submit. What this application, this request goes to your application server, and this application server will connect to your mail, right? It will send a link. That is the reset link is going to be sent out there. So as a hacker, what I will do is that I'll capture the request that is going out here, and I will replay the same request, let's say 100,000 times to the server. So every time this is legitimate request, there is no authentication required or anything. You are going to put an email and they are going to push it out. If I send all 100,000 requests to the server is thinking, okay, this user has, because server does not know that request number 1 and request number 2 are related. It is going to always think there are two different requests, and all these different 100,000 requests are going to be thought as a different request. And for all the 100,000 requests, it will generate a reset link and send it to the email that is specified in the request. In this case, let's say this is my email ID, karthik@gmail.com. Okay. The server would have pushed 100,000 mails to my mail ID. Right. And it will actually, even though this application is not compromised, the user is, his mail ID will be filled and he will have to probably lose all the mails because of that. Or he'll be blocked by the Gmail telling that this mail ID is maybe used for that, which could lead to him losing the mail ID also. Right? A lot of things could happen. So what we will do here is that as a DevSecOps engineer, we'll come here and we'll tell the developer, make sure there is a background check in the server that is happening here. If an application or a user is getting forgot password link, he can only request forgot password link 5 times in a day. Any more request apart from that, this request will be dropped, meaning that will not be processed, and the maximum number of reset links I can receive in my email per day is 5. Anything more than that, you have to wait for 24 hours and do that part. That is the process of that. At the same time, if there is one more design, is that if I'm getting, let's say, if the request from a particular IP, your client, your browser will have an IP address. 100 request is coming from a single minute from an IP. I can also set that firewall should be configured in such a way to block IP. So all the requests from this IP will be blocked for a set amount of time, and after that they can be released out there. So this is done at the design stage itself. I am giving them instructions what has to be included in the code. This is at the development stage and this is at the operation stage. Right, telling the operations to configure the firewall in such a way. This is how it's going to happen. So that is what threat modeling is basically about in a nutshell, where I'm going to the designers and operations team telling them, how do we make it secure? We will identify the application that's going to be done, right? So usually what is going to happen, the requirements are going to be divided in a 6 months time, let's say. Every 15 days, there's going to be a new requirement pushed. So probably there are going to be 12 different requirement cycle. So that the DevSecOps engineer will sit with the development team 12 times in a 6 months period. And he's going to tell them in this, because every time there's a different requirement features. Based on the functionality, he'll tell this is what you're supposed to do. Right? If this particular functionality measure is fixed at that time, when I do the PT part penetration testing, this attack will not work. So I don't have to fix that vulnerability because it is already fixed. Right? So that is how happens in a threat modeling out there. Define security requirements, identify likely threats. As I told, we'll tell these are the threats that is going to be there. And threat assessment. So basically we'll tell which are the chances of getting more out there, right? That particular attack is going to, then we are going to write the mitigation techniques for that. Finally, confirmation of mitigation, right? This is going to happen at the PT level itself. I have told in the design phase, implement it. But whether it's working or not, I will not be aware of it. I will only be aware when you do that part, right? When you do the pen testing, I'll be aware of it. Also, we have to look at is defense in depth. It is a strategy of leveraging multiple security measures to protect an organization assets. Thinking is that is one line of defense is compromised, additional layer exists as a backup to ensure the threats are stopped along the way. It also considers security issues caused by human neglect or behavior, right? One of the reasons why there is an OTP, right? Why there is an OTP whenever you do a bank transaction, whenever you're doing bank transactions nowadays, you will get an OTP to confirm that clarification, right? Previously, what used to happen, there is an attack called CSRF, where you may be randomly clicking on some page which you're not aware, but in the background, this would have transferred money from your account to some other account that is there, right? In order to overcome this situation is why they had a CSRF token and OTP was used so that this particular action may be happening without your knowledge. But when you get an OTP on your mobile phone, then you will see, okay, someone is trying to do that. Let me check what is happening out there. Since the attacker will not have access to this OTP, the transaction will not be completed out. There is one attack here. This is called CSRF token is there to prevent this mechanism from happening. This is solution number 2, right? CSRF token is there, then OTP is there, right? In some cases, I can tell the transaction has to come from a particular device in a geo-lock location, right? So a lot of times you will see that attack is coming from China or some other country out there that you will see. I can tell the request that is going to the bank transfer has to locate in generated in US soil itself. Anything outside the US soil that is going to be there. So now I'm having 3 security measures here for single attack, right? This is what we'll call as a defense in depth. You may be writing a secure code, right? You may be writing a secure code, but even though the code is secure, I'm going to still going to place a web application firewall where it will check for any vulnerable in the payloads file before it reaches the application of that. So again, I'm using multiple security measures out there. And we do this on a day-to-day activity also. Every day, let's say you're having something valuable, what you're going to put? You're going to put that in a safe in your bedroom or in place and store it out there. So let's say you're going on a vacation, you put all your gold ornaments in the safe and kept it out there. Just because it is in a safe, no one can capture it. Are you going to open the room door, keep open out there, and the main door in your house that is also open? And let's say if you're there's a gate if you're in that house and you're going to keep the gate open. No, right? Even though this is safe in this field, I'm going to add additional layer of security, locking the cupboard, locking the room, locking the main door, locking the gate. So if someone wants to steal, they have to break all these things and finally come and break this. So you will have sufficient time to call cops and then try to hand over that part, right? And it is also make sure if someone wants to steal your belongings, they'll always find a way to do it, right? If they're motivated enough, they'll always going to do it. But I can make sure 99.9% of the attacks can be prevented. That one attack you cannot define, right? One basic principle about security is nothing is 100% secure. If someone decides to hack you, they'll always find a way to do it, right? Only thing is that we have to reduce that number, that capability. They have to be extremely skilled to be able to do that activities, right? Secure source code. Source code is major. One more we are talking about here. There are a lot of things that could happen, right? One of the we previously what we used to see is that we look at code, we look at sonar cube, and it will check whether is there any vulnerability running in the sonar cube or anything. If that vulnerability is running, it will display. And a lot of people think that is more than sufficient. But recent times, what we do in pen testing is that we also test their code repositories as well, where it is stored, And one of the organization we saw, they are putting that it is a very big organization. That's a very critical application where they are managing credit, providing credit for, they are having a tie-up with the banks, and the clients, they are acting as a middleman to give them credit card or provide them with the loans. The code for that entire application, by mistake, they have in GitHub repository, they have made it public. Luckily, no one has seen it. We went through the logs and everything, nothing was an issue. But if someone would have, you know, done it, they could have access for that. And unfortunately, they had written some at the server level code background. There was security keys and things for accessing their AWS services also. So it is a way that is there. It would also possible that someone could have pushed a vulnerability into the coding itself, right? So there's a good opportunity. Let's say you're working at a large organization. Someone can come into the organization pretending to be a developer. They'll join the team and they will add a backdoor into the application, right? It's a very, think about Windows operating system, right? Or Microsoft Office. Someone can join who can be a very good developer, and they will come there and they will introduce vulnerability into that so that that can be exploited by anyone of their choice. They can sell that vulnerabilities, right? Vulnerability market is huge. If you find a bug, probably you'll get around $100,000 in some situation. If the same vulnerability is handed over for not to the company, for any seller out there who can be using it for whatever the reason they want, they can go up to $1 million also. Right? Check out, there's a series called Zero Day in YouTube that will have an understanding of that. Right? So who is having access to the code is very important. If there are developers, not everyone should be able to push it, right? Especially when you can push code into the production environment. For testing environment, only certain people will have access to that code. More people will have access to that code. But once the review of that code is done, that has to be merged to an higher level. Then make sure only a few people have access to that code also, right? Check for code, for any injection attack, it is whether it is there or not, right? Data exposure. So insensitive can be exposed through code, commit message and files. Make sure that that informations are not present on them. Right? Don't try to add sensitive data into the code. In some situations, data has happened that during testing phase, the developers to make the during design phase, developer would have hard coded certain username and passwords into the code, and by mistake that would have gone into production. Then anyone would be able to access for that. That becomes a very, very important. So code security plays a very important component out here. Right? Access control, pull requests, protected branches, security advisors, right? So look at that and automatically keep your dependencies up to date and secure. Right? This is basically again is SCA software security software composition analysis. That is where what are the different dependencies that are there, right? That needs to be taken. Usually, you're going to get something like an SBOM, which is software bill of material that is going to be there. Look at all the components that are used out, then make sure everything is up to date. That you have to be very, very careful of that. And container security, as we were talking about, uh, in our main course, we talk about CI/CD pipeline. We talk about how do we introduce multiple stages of it in a CI/CD pipeline. There we also talk about how do we do container security, right? There's a very important tool called Tree Scan out there, which we use. There it will check for that. So in that project, we are using a particular Docker image, which is having some kind of an issue. Because of that, it will identify when we run the scan, it will tell that the Ubuntu OS or the Tomcat that is used in that particular application is vulnerable. It will give a list of vulnerabilities that are there. Not only telling that that particular Docker is having vulnerability, it will give list of CVE details also. All right. So again, having containers, it is going to increase more number of places where attack could happen out there. We can build a vulnerable image, runtime types subjected to attack like hijacking privilege. So all kind of an attacks that are there, it is going to be affected. In a in a normal environment, will also be subjected to same attack levels in the container environment is done, right? So in some cases, containers on the same host share the same OS, leading lesser degree of isolation compared to VM. In this is a bit of a difficult attack, but still possible because containers, unlike virtual machines, there's a complete isolation, right? Where there's having its own operating system and everything. Containers, when you look at the heart of it, is basically process isolation that is happening out there, and all the containers are sharing the same operating system that is going to be there. If that container security is not there, it could lead to accessing the information on the host machine itself. So if I'm able to break out of that isolation, I will have access to the underlying operating system. So when I get underlying operating system and able to hack it, I will have access to the rest of the containers, rest of the confidential data in the entire, that is there. So we have to be careful with that part. All right. So what can be done? How do we overcome container security? Container security is very critical these days. Lot of people are not aware. A lot of people think pen testing is the ultimate security. They are not really understanding DevOps, DevSecOps, shift left approach, right? What they will think is that shift left, they will think once the code goes into testing and before going into production, we'll do pen testing, and they'll think that is shift left. But that is also shift left, but it is not the exact one, right? We have to bring it all the way down to the first step that we are going to take, right? So now they are actually we are in some situations we have trained customers, the development team, and some cases clients who are giving requirements, what is required. They're also trained about what are the different vulnerabilities. So when they are coming up with the requirement, they're giving that it's right. So how do we secure? What are the best practices? We have to look into that. Always use trusted image. Don't use the default images that you don't trust, right? Always make sure principle of least privilege is there. Container should run with the least privilege, then they need to run. So one of the main advantage of using a container compared to VM is container is lightweight. Why it is lightweight compared to VM? It only has programs that is required to run that particular component. It does not have anything extra, right? Whereas VM will have a lot of other things. So some of those other things can actually lead to a vulnerability. So that is there, right? So that is one advantage, and we have to be further add that to that, right? Further check out is still some components that is going to affect. That is there. Monitor container activity. What is there? What is happening? This is common in all places, whether you're using VM container or a normal application. You always have to check. Monitoring is important. That is one of the major WAF guidelines in current situation. A lot of people are not monitoring. They when they get hacked, even after having a lot of security features, they still don't know, right? So that is that. Regularly update, as I told, make sure we are latest one security patch that you have to do, and limit the access to container based on necessity of the rules. Not everyone should be able to do that. The developer also should not be able to have access to the containers. They can only pull that container and use it, but modification of the container, it should not be in their hands. The operations team and the security team should be able to do it. In some cases, only that particular operations guy who's creating, only he'll have access to that particular GitHub repository, right? You can push code into that part. So that is very critical of them. So in our training course, we are using Trivy as a scanner for our scanning containers out there when we are doing out there, right? Finally, the most important concept here is regular training and awareness security, periodic security audit, right? Human training, a lot of all the vulnerabilities, why the competency of that attack vector is gone significantly high, the impact is going to be high, is because of human intervention. Lot of organizations get hacked because one of the employee clicked on a malicious email. Some of them put a malicious pen drive into the organization. They let someone inside the organization, right? So let's say in recently I was had gone for an audit for a company, and I was waiting for someone to let me in, right? There is no security guard outside, where there is no reception area out there where they will inform someone out there to, it's a small organization, about 50 to 60 people out there. So there was an entry reception. In the ground floor, I cleared that and I went to the third floor or fourth floor out there. And I'm waiting for someone to let me in, right? I called the person whom I'm supposed to meet. He told, give me 5 minutes, Karthik. I'm in the middle of a meeting. Just wait out there. I'll come. In the meantime, someone came in. They saw I was waiting. So they swiped their own card and let me in, right? For their luck, I am a security person. I am someone who we trusted. What if there is a malicious actor behaving that is, stuck outside, and someone will buzz him in, right? I continued to do that process. What I did was I went and sat in one place, and that person right next to me saw, and she was a bit perplexed who I was. Then I told him that I'm a new employee. I've joined in. I'm waiting for the HR to onboard me on that. And then I told him, in the meantime, can I connect to the organization network Wi-Fi? And that person thought I was a new guy. So there is no tag because of that. I will be handed the tag end of the day. And he gave me access to the Wi-Fi, right? None of those things should be done, because now I have my laptop, I connected to the office network. A lot of developers are connected to that. My AWS server for that organization is tied up to that organization network. From anywhere else, I cannot connect to that AWS network except that office network. Now I have access to that network, right? I'm sitting there, and it will take, I might go and meet up and pretend to meet the couple of times in that time, to trying to go reach the HR and things and all, and they'll think something is happening, they'll wait. So I might need couple of hours out there maximum and do all my activities and walk out. And a lot of cases when you're working out, there is no swiping or anything. Just click a button, door will open, you can walk out. So this should not have happened out there. We should have trained that employees that this is the issues that is going to happen, right? So it is important for us to train employees at multiple level, right? When you're talking about non-IT people, also should be trained in security for things like allowing someone inside, what is the passport policy and things, all those things. And at a technical level, we'll talk about what are the different breaches, how do you protect your DevSecOps, DevOps environment. All those things are going to be major key role for us. Okay, we need to take all those things and give them training. We have seen, when we have regularly pen testing an organization, the organization a lot of times they reach out back to us telling that, we have fixed vulnerabilities in the previous cycle when you tested, and again when you're testing after 6 months, there are new vulnerabilities introduced into that. And we think this is because the developers don't know anything about vulnerabilities, and this is a major problem. That's why the vulnerabilities keep getting introduced whenever they write the code again and again. So we went there and we gave them a 4 days or 5 days of security training, how an hacker thinks, what are the security measures that has to be kept in place. And to our surprise, in the next cycle after that, we found very little vulnerabilities, very little, and not critical ones, very basic, which could not have a huge impact even if exploited. That is important. So that is also a very important thing to, right? So this plays in very important criteria, and that is why the impact of a DevSecOps engineer is going more and more, right? More, even smaller organizations are taking up DevOps, and they want to implement DevSecOps in their places of there. Main reason is that their client whom they may be working, they have a DevSecOps environment. Now there's a lot of mismatch the way the process, it is affecting the software being released in a larger cycle of that, right? So they are looking to implement at the earlier stages. So it is going to keep on increasing, right? From 4.4 billion in 2022, it is going to reach to $30 billion market value DevSecOps by 2032, right? I think it is going to be much more than that. The way the rapid is happening out there, and again, by 2032, you will see DevSecOps integrated with AI and making it a much more potent out there, right? So if you're someone who's going to stick with DevOps and not going further with DevSecOps or not introducing AI into your knowledge, it will be a lot difficult, right? It will be a lot difficult to get into the survive in the market out there. Right? The pay scales is also very significant. Security, even though there's a we are seeing there is the job market is slow, but we are seeing security is not that slow compared to other, right? The budgeting for security nowadays is a bit more. A lot of companies are introducing, right? A lot of our students, after completing the course, when they go for an interview, one of the questions, right? They usually are interacting when they go directly with the technical managers for the initial round, and final round they're talking with the chief technical officers or information security. In some cases, CEOs are there because they're directly going to be interact with the DevSecOps engineer will directly interact with the top tier management, right? And there, one of the main questions is that can you come on board and help us build a DevSecOps environment? So that is there, right? So because of that, you are adding a lot of value to the organization. You're making their lives much more better. The salaries are also quite high in this role, right? So go through our content, what we are going to teach in our main course. Have a look at it. Any questions you can ask me now, or you can ask later in the WhatsApp group as well, right? But one more thing, when we are talking about DevSecOps environment, if you're someone who is in IT but not in DevOps, jumping to DevSecOps is going to be very, very difficult, right? I would highly recommend start your journey with DevOps. Then you'll have an understanding, okay, this is my cup of tea or not, right? And again, it will ease us. Security is not easy. It takes bit more out of you, right? It is not an easy topic. But when you do DevOps and then come to DevSecOps, it makes it a lot more easier out there. So it makes it, the questioning, reasoning for doing a certain activities that would have been already answered in DevOps. So when you come to that, it makes more sense in DevSecOps. But if you come directly to DevSecOps, it will make very little sense. It will affect your learning as well, right? Uh, do check out with Menon also. There is an end-to-end program for helping our students right from start till the way to the placement as well. Any questions related to that, our course or program, placement program, you can ask now. So we'll be happy to talk about it. And that's it for the training perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Karthik. So thank you for like this awesome kind of session. Hopefully, many, including me, many of us got benefited from this overview of cybersecurity. Guys, if you have any question, feel free to ask. Not only about the course, about the job market. If you are, looking s- actively jobs in US and or any other job market, and you are facing any kind of question, feel free to ask. Uh, the things are not quite good in US job market, but for not for all the domain, some of the domain still we do like having requirement every now and this, but their number are little low.